This stream is sponsored by Brilliant.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight down by SC off.
SC off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
And good morning and live from Slick 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You are looking live at a Falcon 9 rocket with a bunch of Starlink satellites inside of that payload fairing, getting ready to take the Starlink 4-21 mission into a low Earth orbit. I am Chris Gebhardt, and I will be your host for today's launch. And joining me today is none other than Mr. Alex. Alex, how is it going this morning for you?
Well, it's going good. It's going great. I'm excited to see another Falcon 9 launch, even though it's like the 28th or something. We'll go about that later.
I was gonna say you've got some charts and graphs and everything that you wrote about
Yep.
in the epic article that is on our site right now about this mission, and we're definitely gonna go over some things about this mission and where the overall constellation stands and where SpaceX is for the year themselves here in a minute. But yes, Alex, thanks so much for rolling out and joining us today as well. Behind the scenes, you won't hear his voice, but he is there pushing the buttons and pulling the levers and making everything appear on your screens. It's none other than Mr. Patrick. And then out in the field, operating our camera and who will be providing the thing is the one and only Mr. Thomas Burkhart. Thomas, how is it going this morning out there?
It's going well. I would just like to acknowledge that we all have the exact same saying to thank our producers every single time, which is hilarious. But yeah, from out here in the field, looking good. It's a beautiful morning for another rocket launch from Florida.
Yes, it is. And for this gorgeous launch that we are expecting in just a few moments, well, in about 40 minutes' time, if you have any questions about SpaceX, about the Falcon 9, about Starlink, about things that are happening in the space community in general, go ahead and tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat. That allows all the questions that you ask to go into this software pool that Michael has written that allows us to see it and get the questions into the queue. So just make sure to tag us at NASASpaceflight and we will get your questions answered. But to start with here today, Thomas, it's a Starlink mission, but we know that Starlink missions can vary depending, mission to mission, depending on where they're going and what the priorities are. So what are we expecting to see here today with this mission?
Yeah, you got it. So this is a pretty standard Starlink mission. This is the Group 4-21 mission specifically, carrying 53 Starlink satellites today. And like you said, going to low Earth orbit like most Starlink missions do. This one will be flying up the coast, the northeastern United States, towards a 53-degree inclination orbit. It will be a one burn profile for the upper stage today. No coast phase between two burns today. Um, the first stage will be landing on Just Read the Instructions station downrange today. And this first stage booster that will be conducting that landing is aiming to tie a record for the most flights by a single booster. Booster 1058 is the booster at hand, flying its 13th mission. And if successful, it will tie the record set by booster 1060, which also has 13 flights and landings to its name. So a tie for the fleet leader among Falcon 9 boosters today. We are, of course, launching from Space Launch Complex 40, so on the Space Force Station side of Cape Canaveral today. And this is the first mission from SpaceX in the second half of 2022. As they look to continue their busy year and they're on a good pace to surpass more than 50 launches this year, which would also be a new record for SpaceX. And so right now I can report
Sorry.
that they're getting into the countdown here shortly. The weather looks really good for launch day. There's some very light clouds in the area, but nothing that's going to be causing a weather concern. No reports of any weather rules being read or anything, so it should be an on-time launch today. SpaceX does also have actually a backup T0, but I believe they would have to target that before terminal count starts here. And we'll standing by here any second now. We should get confirmation that propeller load has started for Falcon 9. So that'll get us into the business end of the countdown and commit to our 9:11 a.m. Eastern Time or 13:11 UTC T0.
Indeed. And so in addition to just the new Starlinks that are launching today, these version 1.5s that are on board the Falcon 9 today, Alex, will that bring them with the overall Starlink constellation?
Yes. So right now they seem to be about halfway through the shell 4 of the constellation. I actually have the numbers here, if you allow me to, and they are about 548 satellites in shell number 4 of a total of actually I should have said a third of the way, and they are 548 satellites in shell number 4, the shell that these satellites are being launched to. But these are just the operational ones. There are many, many more that have been launched recently, and they haven't been able to get there yet. So they will get there over the next few weeks and months, including these ones, once they are launched. And the target for shell number 4 is about 1,584. So there's many, many of them, about 1,000 of them still yet to go into operational orbit. But whoops, sorry. The ones that are in orbit right now and they can go into operational orbit, or they're still in screening process. They have about 379 of them up there that are still not in operational orbit. But as I said, they have launched many, many Starlink satellites lately, right? And they're still getting there. They'll get there. But yeah, I don't know if perhaps people might have any questions about what's the status of the Starlink constellation and things like that. But one thing I should notice is that I said it before, and I confused that with the shell. Actually, the whole constellation is almost halfway there. So there are about 2,030 satellites already in operational orbits. We are not really that sure if all of them are being operated, but probably yes, because they're already there in that orbit. And the total constellation is 4,408. So it accounts for about 46%. So it's almost there to halfway through the constellation. Which, if people are already aware of that, but if not, I'm already here for saying this, that the FCC puts some restrictions on the deployment of the Starlink satellites, and deadlines, as you have said. And one of the deadlines that they put out is by 5 years after the start of the approval of the constellation, they have to have half of the constellation already launched in operational. So we're approaching that, and it turns out the deadline should have been, I think it was April 2024. So we're getting there about 2 years ahead of time. So that's great. I should point that out. Yeah.
And that's sort of important too, right? Because the other large internet constellations, like Kuiper and everything that's coming up from Amazon too, have to meet those same sort of regulatory deadlines. And we've seen, while SpaceX has opted to use the Falcon 9 for everything up until this point, with Starship coming online for the version 2s of the Starlink satellites as well. We've seen, we've seen the Kuiper constellation go a different route in terms of ensuring that it can meet that 50% deadline by going on 3 different launch providers instead of 1. So yeah, that is a very important part of the overall regulatory process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, at this rate, they could be 100% already, perhaps by the end of next year. So that's impressive. They have a really impressive cadence of Starlink launches. I think Thomas was mentioning that on the article I go over some of the previous launches in the first half of this year. They actually had 15 Starlink launches out of 27. So over half of them were Starlink launches, and we're already expecting 11 on the second half of the year. Obviously, there are going to be more. We just don't know the total count because it's internal missions and so on. But the ones that we do know, they are already 11. So that's a good amount of launches already, just at this stage.
And before
There
we
you
dive into questions, just a quick
Yeah.
update. We are, of course, in the terminal count by this point. Space is confirmed, so propellant loading is underway. And we'll obviously not going to see anything quite yet, but if you keep a close eye on the rocket, you will start to see some vapors condensing around the
Condensation.
rocket as the
Yeah.
rocket starts to get nice and cold with its propellants loading.
And today
And as
the lightning is really good to see that. I just noticed that usually the lightning of the sun, the position and everything doesn't let us see that with a TE, but today it's actually really nice.
We also have a slightly better point of view today. A big thank you to Delta 45 and their support with us covering our launches. We do have a slightly
Ooh.
different angle. We're a little bit closer to the rocket. We're about 2.4 miles away today. And a slightly different angle. You may notice the hangar at Pad 40 is a little bit more off to the right. We can get a slightly better view of the base of the rocket from this spot on base. So we are getting a little bit of a different visual than usual. And hopefully we can catch an early glimpse of fueling from there.
Indeed. And as we've been talking about the overall profile for the mission and where the current constellation stands, you all have been wonderful in getting us your questions. So we're going to start going through some of these. One in particular that we're going to start with from Tom is asking, will I be able to see it as far north as southern New Jersey today? Thomas, you want to take that one for the
Ooh,
lighting angles and viewing for today's launch?
that is right on the edge of where it could be visible. I will going to hedge and say that while I recommend that you look just in case, because it's in daylight and you're pretty far northeast from the launch site, my guess is it will be pretty hard to see. However, if the skies are clear, take a look and report back because I'm interested. But it is pretty far downrange, and sometimes when it's not nighttime, it's harder to pick out in the sky.
There you go. There you go. And another good question here. We got a lot of questions coming in about the various versions of the satellites. Eric asking, how much longer do you think they will? Alex, here's a good one for you. How much longer do you think they will continue to launch the version ones of the Starlink satellites if Starship is coming online, launching version twos? Thanks, Eric, for the question.
Yes. So I do believe they're gonna finish V1 mostly because V2s they're gonna need first a Starship to launch. Like that's the first thing, and it is not guaranteed that it's gonna work on the first flight. So obviously they gotta test it first. They gotta make sure that it works, that it has a regular cadence also once it is operational, so to speak, for launching Starlink satellites. And then we're still talking about V2. So the second generation Constellation, which is where Starship and Starlink V2 come online here. Um, First of all, Starlink V2 is not approved yet. That's one thing. So they cannot even deploy it as of right now. There are some notes there to be had. Like yes, they could probably make an exception, a sort of single permit for just the Starlink test launch, for example, if they're gonna deploy Starlinks and things like that. They have had that in the past, but in the sense of the deployment of the actual constellation, they will have to wait until they actually have paperwork already ready for that from the Federal Communications Commission. But that's just the paperwork side, right? The readiness side, we're talking about V2 probably not being in full force deployment, so to speak, until at least the 2023 timeframe, perhaps the later half of of 2023, right? Whereas V1 could be already completed, as I said, at this rate of cadence, it could already be done by perhaps summer, fall of 2023. Obviously, launches. Then they gotta put on they gotta raise their orbit, they gotta be screened and everything, and they gotta go into the operational orbits and things like that. But there's gonna be overlap between the launches of V1 and V2, as V1 is completed and V2 is starting, and then there's gonna be operational overlap between both until V1, the satellites just they're just becoming obsolete. There's a point where V2 is gonna be there's going to be so many satellites already in orbit that they're going to be able to take over all of the coverage of V1. So they're going to V1 just going to be redundant and obsolete. So they're not going to need that. But I think that time is probably not coming until 2025 or thereabouts. So we're probably going to see a good 2 or 3 years of overlap of both constellations, and then it's gonna be like a tail off for V1. It's just not gonna be launching. It's not gonna be even replaced, perhaps. I don't know, but that's total speculation, I should say. So we'll see what happens in reality. But I guess I think it's a sort of good speculation there.
Excellent, excellent. And just also wanted to very quickly thank Roberto for becoming a Capcom member, and Chronic for becoming a PadRat member. Thank you so much for those longer term monthly recurring memberships. That really means a lot to us here at NASA Spaceflight, and that continued support is what allows us to be here to bring you these launches and work on all the other amazing projects that we've got going on for you. So truly, Roberto, thank you so much for becoming a Capcom. That definitely gets you access to our Discord channel. So come join the fun and hilarity and hanging out with all of us. And Chronic, thank you for the PadRat membership. With that as well, and that recurring monthly support, that really means a true lot to us over here. And here and Musical Wolves, I had to do the math on this, but I got it for you. Musical Wolves with a fantastic question here. How many bananas would need to be stacked to equal the height of those 4 cool-looking towers? Hashtag banana for scale breakfast fund. All right, well, a banana on average is 7 inches in height, and the launch towers or 0.17 meters. And the lightning towers at Pad 40 are 76.2 meters tall, which means you would need 428 bananas. So there you go. Bananas,
really
corn,
we
like
never thought we'd ask about.
exactly, exactly. But there you go, and thus answering the question for everyone else. The 4 towers are the lightning protection system around the rocket, which, as Thomas talked about the weather today, is not currently needed, but something that we definitely want in Florida for those summer afternoon thunderstorms that do pop up. So that is what the 4 towers are, and 428 bananas is the answer to the question. And Jerwa with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much for that support, saying, anyone else getting giddy about possible exoplanet spectra data from the James Webb Space Telescope? Yes. Many things I am fascinated about and looking forward to with eager anticipation with James Webb, including those first images, which should be out next week. And yeah, definitely. We're definitely going to cover that. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. We're not letting James Webb in a big moment like that slip through our fingers. So yeah, definitely looking forward to everything that it's got coming. But yeah, the exoplanet spectra data and helping us understand what an exoplanet's atmosphere is actually made of and composed of, which helps us understand not just what the planet is, but what its possibility is for harboring life, and even potentially if we can find some of those telltale symbols of industrialization with atmospheric pollutants, potentially looking at planets that are currently inhabited as well. It can really do a lot. So yeah, I am very much looking forward to what this telescope can give us. And Tom C with the $20 super chat saying, add NSF for the 20-minute vent. Do we all have any plans for a Starship booster plushie with Velcro for mating? I'd say stay tuned for some of our plans for some of our merchandise, but that's definitely a good idea. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. And Robbie Bradley with a Launch Director membership. Thank you so much. Wow, that is that is an incredible amount of trust and support that you are giving to us each month. And thank you very much, Robbie. Really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Alrighty, so
And also
coming up
Discord
here,
access. I just remember that.
sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Also Discord member, Discord access, because if you're Capcom or above, and I believe launch trajectory is above Capcom,
Yes.
so you can get also Discord access. I just saw people Discord on like the Nightbot command on chat.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and that gets you into our Discord, like Alex was saying, and you can come hang out with us and enjoy the hilarity that ensues with us. But also, it's a good community to just hang out with and nerd out with as well. But okay, before we move on to our next question, we are about to be coming up on the Telltale T-minus 20-minute event, which has just begun on your screen
Right
there,
on
right
cue.
on
Well done.
time. Yes, it's almost like I practiced that. But Thomas, do you want to tell us exactly what we are looking at? Because this is a very normal event for the Falcon 9 at this time.
Yes, so like we mentioned, Falcon 9 is currently in its countdown where it is loading propellants on, well, I guess Falcon 9 isn't doing loading. The ground systems are loading propellant onto Falcon 9, and this vent marks the point where RP1 kerosene is done being loaded into the upper stage, and that vent that you're seeing is the excess nitrogen from purging the lines on the transporter erector. And also mostly just condensing the air around the very cold nitrogen, which is what you mostly see. You're actually just mostly seeing water vapor. But the ground lines are being purged with nitrogen to remove any residual kerosene from those lines so that they can use those same systems to load liquid oxygen into the upper stage. This is different from the first stage, which gets loaded simultaneously. The kerosene and oxygen gets loaded at the same time onto the first stage, which makes sense. Of course, the first stage is bigger. You need to load more commodities onto that stage. But the upper stage, they do one and then the other. So kerosene loading on stage 2 is now complete, and they're going to quickly load into liquid oxygen loading. And the reason they do it in that order as well is because liquid oxygen will boil off faster than the kerosene. Kerosene won't technically boil off. It's more about just ambient temperature, because kerosene is still stable at ambient temperature, but SpaceX keeps it nice and cold so it's denser and has more performance. So they load liquid oxygen second because oxygen will boil off a little bit faster. So load it later, it has less time to boil off. But yeah, so countdown proceeding nominally, propellant loading continuing on right on track for an on-time liftoff.
Indeed. And a couple other questions here, and one very specific about what you were just talking about in this T-minus 20-minute event. Roberto is asking about the transporter erectors, because Vandenberg's is an older version. So what's the difference between the two transporter erectors at the ones at the Cape versus the ones that are out at Vandenberg?
Yeah, that was a great question. So the one at 40 would have been the first one. However, this one has also been upgraded and changed and modified. Primarily driven by the fact that both of the pads here at 40 and also at 39A here in Cape Canaveral face a higher launch cadence than the one in Vandenberg. So as SpaceX has learned from all these missions about how to reduce pad turnaround time, part of that is the time to turn around the transporter erector, and they've implemented changes there. If you look at some images of all three, you'll notice that all three of them are different. And a lot of that is incorporating lessons learned from pad turnarounds and things like that. The Vandenberg one simply hasn't needed a lot of upgrades. They haven't put a lot of resources into that because that pad just doesn't launch as often. If you look at
Also,
pad, oh, go ahead, Alex.
I will point out it also reflects a little bit of the history of each pad.
Yeah, sure.
Vandenberg, for example, has a wider base than Slick 40, even though it is older. But that's because it was supposed to launch Falcon Heavy at the beginning, like way back. So it is wider, sort of like the LC-39A launch mount. But LC-39A is actually configured for supporting Falcon Heavy, unlike Vandenberg. But also on the other hand, the Stromback on 40 was upgraded only because AMO 6 happened, right? And
Yeah.
who knows what will have happened if AMO 6 hadn't happened, right? Perhaps they will just done the same, just move over to 39A while they upgrade things at Pad 40. Just a guess, but yeah.
Yeah, and indeed, and Bob Robert Hobson, Bob Hobb, with a $200 super chat. Thank you
Wow.
so much. That
Wow.
almost completely breaks my brain. So I really want to stress that this is my genuine voice of shock and appreciation. I'm not making light of this. Thank you so much. Really, thank you. And the question that came along with it was, in honor of Capstone's comm recoveries, how much delta V would be needed to get a banana into a near rectilinear halo orbit? Okay, we started a banana trend now, which is different than
my
the corn trend we
goodness.
had last year. So we're working our way through the various food groups. Um, well,
Right.
it would be slightly less delta V than what Capstone actually requires. But Capstone's a pretty small satellite. We can kind of figure that out in terms of the delta V. But Thomas, do you want to take real quickly like what happened with Capstone and the comms recovery for anyone who's not familiar with what happened there?
Yeah, I thought you were about to ask me to do that calculation on the fly, and I'm like, Chris, I do not have the ability to do that without like a computer.
As someone who would never do
Well,
math live on air, I would never ask that of somebody
If I
else.
had a computer,
I
I'd
will
give it a shot, but I
I will
cannot do
point
that. It's
out
not mental math.
I will point out one thing, and is that orbital mechanics doesn't matter if it's a banana, a starship, or whatever. So the delta V should be the same as Capstone. So
That's true.
yeah,
Oh,
there
that
you
you
go.
know what? Okay. Well, if you account for gravity losses during launch, which would be different if the payload mass is
Well,
different,
but I'm
it's not
Right.
talking about the
technically
delta
the
V
same,
needed.
Alex.
I'm talking about the delta V needed to go
The ideal delta
into
V.
yeah, exactly.
Assume
So
no gravity. No. But to give an update for the reference from the super chat, and again, thank you so much for the support. That's really generous. Capstone, which launched successfully on an Electron rocket just a week or so ago, did encounter some communications issue right after separating from the Lunar Photon vehicle, Rocket Lab's kick stage. Um, Lunar Photon's job on this mission was to raise its orbit a bunch and get it on a trajectory that eventually led to a translunar injection. And then Capstone is going to now do its own maneuvering to get into its NRHO orbit. Right after separation, there was a little bit of communications issues. The teams are still working exactly happened, but we do know that they've regained communications and that the spacecraft is healthy. It performed fine while they were out of communications. They're getting ready. I think even today is the first trajectory correction maneuver that the spacecraft is supposed to conduct. So all on track there. They're still going to work out and figure out what exactly happened to have that brief loss of communications, but the system has recovered and the mission is not really in danger anymore. And the teams are just going to work to make sure they understood what happened so they know it won't happen again. But everything appears to be healthy now.
There you go. There you go. And again, thank you so much, Robert, for that support. The super chats, the memberships. When we say they help us bring you these missions and everything, we really mean it. They help us roll out with our own camera. Like this isn't a feed provided by SpaceX or the 45th. This is a camera that Thomas took out there. Audio equipment that Thomas took out there for himself. That's ours, and that we were able to get based on that support from you and everything. So thank you. The support really does help us and really does get directly reinvested into everything that we do here for what we bring you, not just here at and not just here at the Cape for launches, but at Boca, at McGregor, at all of the different locations, and the folks who will roll out to Vandenberg for launches there as well. It helps us across the board. So thank you. It really does mean a lot to us. So another question here that we've got is regarding the version 2 Starlink satellites. Callan is asking, basically, should they test the version 2 Starlinks on a Falcon 9 before committing them to a Starship? And is there any cost prohibitiveness to putting them on a Falcon 9 instead?
yeah, I believe the problem with that is perhaps the size of the satellite, because we know it's about 7 meters long. So obviously you cannot put it flat. You got to put it sort of like vertical position inside the fairing, and still it will probably take up a huge chunk of the fairing. It's very long, and yeah, I don't think the problem with launching on Falcon. So I think that problem might be very limiting to launch any prototypes. And I guess with the Starship sort of being around the corner, you could probably just launch it on Starship if they are prototype satellites. You can you don't need to worry about launching them on Falcon 9. probably also will need a different sort of deployment mechanism, or just by a different way of holding them, because you cannot put it flat, as I said before, because it will just be larger than the fairing. So yeah, I don't think it will be a great one-to-one test of how it should be for Starship. I think just wait a little bit more and just launch it on Starship. It's better on the long run. That's my opinion.
That definitely works. And all right, well, we are just under the 11-minute mark before liftoff, and I did want to take a quick moment to say a thank you to our sponsor, Brilliant. And for those of you who are watching the stream, a lot of times you get asked what are the various ways that you can support NASA spaceflight, and checking out Brilliant and some of their courses is another great way that you can support us directly, because Brilliant is a good supporter and a great friend and sponsor for NASA spaceflight. And what we were just talking about there earlier in one of the questions about the delta velocity needed to get a banana instead of capstone to the moon, is actually related to a course that I've been working on here, because Brilliant is a great interactive way to learn, right? It's a great way to brush up on things that you've already learned about, or to go, hey, like I've always wondered about that, and they've got a course on this, so let me check it out. And one of those courses is actually about the conservation of energy, which relates to celestial mechanics. So sometimes when you see a rocket launch, right, you'll see the velocity on the second stage, accelerating as it's pushing the payload into orbit, and then all of a sudden, the engine cuts off and the velocity starts dropping. Well, why does the velocity start dropping? Well, it's because Earth and gravity are pulling down on that stage, because an orbit might not be a completely perfect circle. So if you look at if you look at the example that's on screen right now, that not the straight descent down the hill, but the more curved descent down the hill is sort of what an orbit does when it's not perfectly circular. When gravity is pulling you back down toward the lowest part in your orbit, your periapsis, your velocity is going to increase. And then as you ascend back up toward your apoapsis, your velocity is going to decrease. But ultimately, that velocity, that energy that is that velocity, isn't being created or destroyed. It's just being transferred back and forth between the rocket and Earth. And ultimately, you wind up at the same average orbital velocity. So celestial mechanics, orbital mechanics are right here in Brilliant's lessons too. They're fun, they're interactive, and when you get an answer wrong, if you don't really understand something, there's always a great explanation there. So really do check out Brilliant. There's a link in chat right now. If you want to open that in a different browser window right now and then check it out after the launch, checking out those lessons and those plans that they have is indeed another way that you can support us here at NASA Spaceflight. So go ahead and check them out after the rocket launches here. But go ahead and open that so you've got it. And thank you again to Brilliant for all of the support to NASA Spaceflight. Alrighty. Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
So during that, I just feel inclined to point out that Cape Canaveral Security has made their presence known again today. They've not been operating in stealth mode as often recently. I wonder what's up with that. But we got a gator friend with us today.
There we go. Cape Security, the alligators. They need their love too. They do good work out there. But all right, that means that we are under 10 minutes to go. We are at 7 minutes, 24 seconds and counting, which means Falcon 9 is currently chilling down its Merlin 1D engines, getting ready for liftoff to take 53 Starlink version 1.5 satellites into a low Earth orbit. For those of you who are just joining us, launching this mission is booster 1058-13, making its 13th flight today, and it will tie a record set by booster 1060. So it'll be the second to reach the 13 flight mark for SpaceX. So far, everything has gone smoothly with the countdown, and fueling operations are wrapping up across the vehicle right now in preparation for a liftoff at 9:11 and 13 seconds here from Slick 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. So as we continue to count down, we're going to continue to take some of your questions here. Matt, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. No question, just support. We're really looking forward to that liftoff today, and really thankful for that support. Flawed Perspective saying this Falcon 9 looks a bit toasty. How many times has it flown? You're typing that question right as I was answering it. So this is the 13th flight for this booster. And all of the boosters have projected lifespans of up to 100 missions per the last thing that Elon said. They go about 10-ish flights before they go through more intensive inspections, and then they can fly up to 100, they think, so far. Here's a good question from Mark that came with it, that came with some support as well, asking how many more launches until they finish the entire Starlink network of satellites. And I think this is a very interesting question because they'll also have to be replenishing the network from time to time as certain satellites fail or they want to upgrade it. So, what's the best way to answer this question, Thomas or Alex?
Well, I think I did a few sort of back of the napkin calculations the other day, mainly because I was sorting through all the data for the Starlink constellation and everything, and I calculated approximately 30 to 40 launches left for deploying the satellites. But it is true, as you said, that once they are deployed, they might be wanted to replace the ones that get lost, and with the screening and things like that. So um, it could be a thing, yeah. But we'll see. There's also the factor here of a Starlink 2, Starlink V2, and Starship, right? So we'll see what happens there.
Indeed. And Kevin with a good question here too. What is the inclination for today's mission? Alex, want to take that one?
Yep, 53.2 degrees.
There
It's
we
a little
go.
bit higher inclination than the ISS.
And heading northeast up the coast of the US today, correct?
Yeah, it's going northeast. It's not going southeast. We've seen a few launches that went southeast, but this time around is northeast. And actually, ever since spring came, they're going northeast. Mostly because the reason why they chose to do southeast was because of the weather in like near the Caribbean and things like that. It's much nicer in the winter than the North Atlantic Ocean. So that's one of the reasons why they did that.
Very nice. And as we ease down under the 4-minute mark until liftoff, John actually telling us that regarding the brilliant that his little one and him use it, and if something actually piques her interest, he tries to make an experiment that goes along with it so that she can keep throwing, and it's very fun. That's awesome to hear. Really awesome to hear. And glad you do that. Just from a personal note, glad you do that and make the experiments for her. That's got to be really fun for her. All right. One quick question here before we get to the liftoff here. Rough Rider Show asking, given all of the payload readiness delays for Falcon Heavy, do we think that the boosters that were originally intended for the Psyche mission will end up flying a different Falcon Heavy mission first, or end up being Falcon 9s? What are they sort of doing with the Falcon Heavies that they've been juggling as the payloads haven't been ready for them?
Yes, so I believe the ones for Psyche are sort of NASA oriented in some sense. They probably followed all the testing campaign, things like that at McGregor, and the production of the boosters. So those are most likely going to be kept for Psyche anyways. And those actually were scheduled to be launched after that on Europa Clipper, and those on Europa Clipper are going to be expended. So like Europa Clipper is just going to be fully expendable launch. That's not, there's not going to be a recovery with that because we need Falcon Heavy, like full on Falcon Heavy performance. Excuse me. So yeah, I don't think we're probably going to see them on Falcon 9 flights or things like that. And then for the other flights, I believe the USS missions, they probably can just shuffle the boosters between missions and they just use the side boosters wherever the first one comes in first. I believe it is USSF 67 now, the one that is first. So perhaps they're just gonna do that. And then there's ones for Viasat 3, but I believe those are still scheduled to be on that mission. But
Gotcha.
because it hasn't really delayed that much. But yeah.
Gotcha. All right. And with 90 seconds to go, you can see the final vent that Falcon 9 is doing there, indicating that fuel loading is complete on the vehicle. So Falcon 9 now has a full load of its densified liquid oxygen and chilled RP1 kerosene propellant. And yeah, under 90 seconds to go until the liftoff now. So Thomas, good luck with the track out in the field. Can't wait to see what you capture here as Falcon 9 prepares to take 53 new Starlink satellites into orbit as part of the initial build out of the Constellation continues. Now ticking down under 1 minute and counting. So to all of you around the world who are watching, thank you for joining us for the liftoff here today. And for those of you who are in Florida and may have traveled for the launch, hopefully you are having a good vacation. And George, we see your question about planning a trip for a vacation, and we'll get to it after the liftoff here, which we are now 37 seconds away from. So Falcon 9 has pressurized its tanks at this point for liftoff, and we should have a go from the launch director for
Yep,
ignition of the Merlin engines.
Just heard that. Launch director having its final launch today. It's retiring.
Ah, there you go. So final launch for the current launch director who is retiring today. 15 seconds to go until that moment. So here we go for the launch of the Starlink 4-21 mission from Florida. Good ignition, and we have a liftoff of the Falcon 9, the second 13th flight for a Falcon 9 booster, and 53 new internet satellites on their way to orbit. Go, internet rocket, go! Passing 1 minute into the flight. Everything's still good for Falcon 9 today. Great sound there from the Cape.
Today's better. We are closer.
Indeed, and you can see the vapor condensation trail forming behind Falcon 9 as she passes through roughly 11 kilometers in altitude. There is when that starts, and that's normal for liquid-fueled rockets, especially the liquid oxygen and liquid kerosene variant that the Falcon 9 uses. And Thomas, this is an excellent track. This is Thomas manually tracking this. This is not automated. That robot is with Michael right now. So this is Thomas with a manual track of the Falcon 9 there, as the first stage continues to fire, taking their payloads of 53 Starlink satellites to orbit. This is now an onboard view from the Falcon 9 first stage, looking back at Florida, and you can very clearly see the Kennedy Space Center and the launch pads there in the background, just to the right of the flames of the rocket. And there's the track from Thomas again, as we are coming up on booster engine cutoff, where the 9 Merlin Wendy engines will shut down just prior to stage separation. And Alex, that shutdown of the engines is actually staggered, is it not?
Yep. And there we have it.
And there we have it. And you can see, there we go, yeah, on the onboard cameras there, showing the stage separation coming up here momentarily. This is actually looking in the inner stage, looking up into the engine of the second stage. There you go, and you can see there good MVAC ignition on the second stage. And MVAC, in case you are unaware, it just means Merlin vacuum engines. So it's the same Merlin design as the first stage uses, just optimized for use in a vacuum. And look at that! Wow, that was an incredible infrared shot there for a second.
Oh, yeah.
That really was. But yeah, you had a few things that happened in quick succession there. We had a good separation of the first stage, ignition of the upper stage single Merlin vacuum optimized engine, and separation of the payload fairings. So they are on their way back down to be recovered and fished out of the Atlantic as well, while the first stage is headed for Just Read the Instructions, which I believe, Alex, is like 660 kilometers northeast of the northeast of the launch site today.
Yeah, 664 was it?
There
Yeah,
we go.
I think on the article says 664. I
There we
remember that
go.
because I had to look it up a lot of times. Yeah.
There we go. So if you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the first stage reorienting itself in preparation for its entry burn a little later in its profile. And on the right, you can see the second stage continuing to take the Starlink payloads into orbit. And you can see the two velocities that are doing different things, right? The first stage is increasing in altitude right now and decreasing in velocity. So if you remember what we talked about a little earlier in Brilliant's lesson, this is just the energy exchange between the booster and Earth. And once the booster reaches its apogee, or highest point in its trajectory, that velocity will begin to increase as the booster comes back down. Just with that energy transfer between the Earth and the booster. But then you can also see on the right-hand side of your screen the velocity of the second stage shooting upward past 10,000 kilometers an hour. And we're looking for a rough orbital speed around 27,000 kilometers an hour for orbit insertion here today. But all definitely looking well. And these views of the first stage are incredible, like always, aren't they, Alex?
Yeah. One thing I should notice, I just saw the apogee altitude. It's actually a little bit higher than usual, so I guess perhaps SpaceX is not fiddling with the trajectories. We'll see.
I was gonna
We
say
have
like
people.
yeah,
No, go
peaking
ahead.
in the 130s is a little high for a Starlink mission.
Yeah, right. We have people on the NASA spaceflight forums, which, by the way, everyone should check out those because, as I said, we have people right there that analyze all of this data of the webcasts and make graphs and things like that, and try to sort through whatever changes they have been making to these launches. We know that they have been making some optimizations on the flight profile and the thrust and things like that. So yeah, now we're coming up close to entry burn, which should be, as usual, it's going to be center engine first, then two other engines, engine 1 and engine 5, and then it's going to be for about 20 seconds or so on those three engines, and then shutdown of the outer two engines, and then the inner engine. And you're going to see that first. It's going to be you're going to notice that on the exhaust, it's going to be sort of like a circular pattern first. That's the center engine, and then it's going to be like a line of fire of sorts. So yeah,
A
we're gonna
line of
see that.
fire, I love it.
Yeah, with all three engines firing, it sort of looks like a line of fire. From the ground, it's sort of it's more like a carpet of sorts, like it's flying on a carpet of fire. But yeah, from the booster side of view is that kind of view. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see that entry burn about to happen as we are under 70 kilometers in altitude now for the first stage, just over 8,000 kilometers an hour. Watch that speed drop when those engines ignite. It is impressive, but also quick check on the second stage, and it is
1
continuing to do its job. But here we go with the entry
and
burn.
3. There we go.
And you can see that line, right? Exactly what you were saying, that line of
Yeah.
fire that forms, not a circle.
Yeah. And now circle and then shut down.
And
You can
shut
see-
down.
And now the grid fins are going to be crazy steering the rocket. Now it's when the grid fins those are actually doing most of the work here.
Mm-hmm. And you can see just the physical resistance of the air pressure now slowing the Falcon 9 down in the air as it continues to descend under 20 kilometers now and getting ready for its landing. And meanwhile, second stage continuing to do well, closing in on 20,000 kilometers an hour and 229 kilometers in altitude. So
Hopefully-
that is good.
Hopefully, we also see some condensation from going through the speed of sound.
Mhm.
Let's see. It should be about now. If we don't see it now, it's not gonna happen. Yeah.
Yeah, as it comes back in.
Something. There we go.
There we go.
That
There we
it
go.
is.
So as it's heading down there, Andrew has a great question. Why doesn't the telemetry show 0 kilometers per hour when it reaches its apogee? Well, because it's 0 in terms of your vertical velocity. So your vertical velocity reaches 0, but
You can see the drone ship here. Oh boy.
yeah, and here
It
it
was behind the
comes.
grid fin. And second stage is about to enter orbit. Oh. Seems like they lost telemetry or video or something, but it seems like the second stage is already in orbit, so that's good. We always like that.
Yeah, we definitely just had a velocity stop on this on the second stage, and that's a good velocity for where they are, 27,059. Yeah. Yeah, so just seeing what we'll see what happened there with the booster, and telemetry dropouts are not necessarily uncommon there as they descend down toward the drone ships, but we'll wait to see exactly what SpaceX has to say about how that landing took place. But there is Das's. He's not here today. Well, he's here. He's in the background. But this is Das's favorite view on launch day: an empty launch pad with a half thrown back transporter erector. Meaning that we had a successful liftoff. And yeah, 53 new Starlink satellites are in orbit, the second stage achieving that orbit there just shortly after liftoff, and there is a good view of it, and now the overall trajectory of where they are
I
on the
believe
planet.
they have already confirmed. So I just heard some telemetry call out for stage 1. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stage 1
1
landing
landing.
confirmed.
All right, so stage 1 did land, even though they lost the feed from it. Alex is hearing over the nets there, so that's good. That's good. That means
Yeah.
we got the booster back again. I can use it again. But there is our view from the second stage, which is orbital 10.5 minutes after liftoff. I'm going to run through just a couple of other things. Robbie saying, "Good morning, y'all. Thank you for all that you do. I was renewing my membership, actually, and love hanging out with all of you." Yeah, Robbie, you were a Capcom member or Launch Director member, I believe, renewing your membership. Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot to us, as we said earlier. And Andrew was asking us during the liftoff, why doesn't the telemetry show 0 when the rocket reaches apogee? And there are two different ways to think of velocity with rockets. There's a vertical velocity and a horizontal velocity component to this, and then a relative velocity, and then you can do relative velocity between two different things as well. But basically, when it's ascending up toward apogee, your vertical velocity does reach 0 at apogee, and then you begin falling back down. But the overall velocity energy that you have doesn't reach 0 at that moment. That you are still moving in relation to the ground track of Earth. You are still moving in relation to your overall trajectory, and that's what that sort of velocity is measuring. It's that velocity along the trajectory, which means it's touches the drone ship in that regard. So that's why it doesn't show 0 when it reaches apogee. Same that if you were just looking at the orbital velocities from a standard orbit, your orbital velocity would never reach 0, even though your vertical velocity would as you reach perigee and apogee with that. And yeah, and the other question here that we had that I would like to hit is how do you plan a trip around a launch? What if it slips? Well, that's sort of one of the things, George, that you've got to take into consideration. And one thing that I would always advocate for when you're planning a trip around a launch is give yourself several days. Don't plan for the launch to be the last day you're in town if you can do that. Plan for the launch to be like the second day you're in town or several hours after you get in. That way you can give yourself the maximum amount of times because, yeah, minor technical issues or weather issues can cause 24 to 48 hour delays. And yeah, if it slips outside of your vacation time, you're out of luck at that point. So I would definitely try to schedule it not so that you're here toward the beginning of the launch window so you can give yourself the most time. But I think that will actually do it for our broadcast here today. And you are now looking live at FleetCam, where we have the previous Falcon 9 that launched. Getting ready for its well, it looks like it's getting ready for leg day. But it's got some leg exercises to do a little bit later. So, but that is a Falcon 9 in Port Canaveral getting ready for refurbishment and reflight, is it not, Alex?
Yep, B1073 flew Starlink 415 and SCS-22. It's the latest entry on the booster fleet. A rookie booster.
A rookie booster. Love it. I love it. But yeah, Alex, thank you so much for joining us and hanging out with us today. Your knowledge is about these is impressive as always. Thank you much, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
And also behind the scenes was Mr. Patrick making all of this possible. Patrick, thank you so much. I know it was slightly earlier for us in the Central Time Zone here today, rolling out, but we love bringing you all of this. So thank you for that, Patrick, as well. And he was in the field, but he is no longer. Thomas Burkhardt out there providing the live stream and the tracking for us as well. And Stephen Marr was also out there on the causeway taking pictures and everything. Can't wait to see what he captured from this morning's launch as well. But with that, I am Chris Gebhardt. I'm the assistant managing editor here at NASA Spaceflight. And thank you so much to everyone who joined and participated in our live stream. It's because of all of you and your generous support and trusting us that we are able to bring you exactly what we love. And we love doing this. So thank you so much for that support and that trust in our reporting. And that will do it for us for today. But we are going to send you over to Starbase Live because there is a lot of stuff happening with the other big SpaceX rocket with Starship. So definitely have Starbase Live up in the background on another monitor at work. You know, they won't know. They won't know. And just say it's science. It's education. You're watching history. But definitely some testing might be going on with the ship and the booster today. So check out Starbase Live, and we're going to send you over there. But until then, have a great day, and we'll see you later, nerds.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Traveling up. Roger roll with Atlantis.
Water towers can fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight outside SC off. SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.